Hello again, my friends. Welcome back. And it is time, once again, for me to put out another State of the Game. This is a series that I've been creating that I plan on doing once a month. If you've been following along, great. If not, welcome. And in these States of the Game, I take a moment to sort of review the previous month that just happened and take a quick peek forward to the month to come, just to give everyone an idea of what you need to keep up with to stay current for Empires and Puzzles. So let's go ahead and take a peek into what we have coming in this particular episode. So, on the agenda for this month, we are going to start things out with our power creep tracker, like we always do. Then we'll go into a 10 gem pull challenge review, which they did the ninjas as well as Season 3 this time around. We have the Hero League debacle and all the issues that went on with Magic Tower Heroes in there. We will go into the Harvest Summon review. Apparently, I didn't finish that title. That's okay. And then quality of life changes. We'll discuss the continuous things that they do to affect the quality of life in the game. The death of the forums, because apparently that's a thing. You need to be aware of that. That's a big change. And then we'll go into meta changes as well as the October calendar review, so you can be prepared for everything coming in October and make sure that you know what is going on. So without further ado, let's move on into the first topic. Power creep tracker. Very much fun. Okay, so this is something that I've started doing to help people understand how fast things are progressing within Empires and Puzzles. If you're familiar, once again, I don't need to go into the long description again, but just a brief description for anyone who might be new watching the video for the first time. Power creep is a device that the game uses to ensure that newer heroes will consistently be better than older heroes. So they do this by increasing the CP power of the cards, and how quickly or slowly they increase that is a direct sign of how quickly these things will fall off of being useful at the tail end of things as well. So based off of that, I understand the need for this. This is to ensure that their company continues to make money. If the company doesn't make money, they won't make the game. It's that simple. There's got to be an acceptance of this within the game, but how powerful and how quickly they do it is the key. Based off of that and the previous months of doing this, I decided that the goal should really be around 10 CP a month or 120 CP a year. I think that's a reasonable pace where they get what they need, but we as players aren't getting heroes that are going to fall off in a year, because this is a long-term game. We really want to be getting several years worth of use out of these characters. So that in mind, let's see how we did for this previous month. So the month of September, we did come in at a CP of 10. I will say this, I started doing this a while ago and I posted on the forums. I don't know whether anyone at SG or Empires and Puzzles team actually listens to my videos, but I've noticed that they are trying to keep somewhere around this 10 CP goal. So even if they aren't listening to me, I think that they, in their own minds, consider this to be a reasonable track point as well. Now, it hasn't always been like this. There have been times where they were doing significantly more than 10 a month, so I appreciate that they've brought that back down, but as you can see, we're hovering right around that like 10 to 15 mark, which would be acceptable. We obviously want it closer to 10, but up to 15 is doable. It just depends on how many new heroes they release in a month, that sort of thing as well. So this does bring our year-to-date CP growth of 124, and that would be since January 1st characters were released. So if we can keep this number under like 200 for the year, we're great. Honestly, if it was 10 per month, it would be at 120, so we've already passed that. But again, we are doing way better than we have for the previous years. Let's see if we can even keep it under 150. That would give us enough range for what? We've got 2 more months, basically. So yeah, as long as they keep it in that range, we should be under 150 total CP growth for the year. So that's the goal, guys. Let's hope we stay within that margin, and then let's go ahead and move on to the next section. Next up, we'll take a quick moment to go into our 10 Gem Summon Challenge. This was the Ninjas Edition, and we have to make a decision on whether or not we thought this was a good offering from Empires and Puzzles. This time around, they only wanted 10 gems, and I think that that is really cool, because most people, even if they are free to play, can save up and possibly accomplish a 10 gem pull. So I like that most players are able to participate. It then just becomes a question of what they're willing to offer us, and is there value in doing this pull for these players? And in this case, I would say yes. They did Ninjas and they did Season 3. Now, Season 3 might not seem very exciting to some, but I will point out that the Season 3 characters that they offered were pretty viable. So, for example, we'll start with Lord Loki. Lord Loki is a badass. Like, I mean, he's basically the king of countering different specials, especially considering he can copy someone's special at average speed, oftentimes being able to copy a slow special faster than they can cast their special to begin with. The thing about Loki is he's a forever character. His special will never grow old because he'll constantly copy the specials of brand new characters that are coming out. So everybody benefits. Literally, every single player would benefit from having Loki in their roster double limit broken. So if you have him and you've been debating if you should level him, I promise you, you should. You 100% should. So that was a cool offering. Heimdall was still a good resurrector, and although he's falling off in stats, he's still one of the more effective resurrectors in the game, so you couldn't really complain about that. Some of the ones that weren't as exciting, you had Freya, Sif, Elfreke. Now, they're okay. Elfreke can still be pretty good with the Mindless cubes, but she operates it slow, her stats are falling off, and we are in the world of Reflect and Resists, so she's just not as impactful as she used to be. Sif can still be pretty good for mana generation counterattack. Freya as a minion maker is not super exciting, but she can pair well with like Three Kingdoms characters or other strong minion makers. So, she could possibly be interesting. But the ninjas themselves, although they don't have costumes, 4 of the 5 ninjas were the newer ninjas that they have released. And although these characters are absolutely silly on defense, they are actually wonderfully strong attackers. If you pulled any of these guys, they are worth putting into your attack roster. I love what the ninjas can do on offense. Very versatile, very fun. So if you pulled one of them, congratulations. And I do think this was a good offering from Empires and Puzzles. I hope that they consider doing more 10 pulls with this level of value. It's definitely exciting. So I hope you pulled something great, and you're welcome to leave comments on whether you thought this was of value to you, or if they should have done better, or if you prefer even 20 or 30 pulls for something even greater. It'd be interesting to see what other people's thoughts are on the subject. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. Oh, yes, okay. So let's go back into the Hero League. I understand that we did cover this last month, and I did mention it, but I remember talking about how they decided to give such insane bonuses to the newer heroes that have come out with costumes recently. So you started getting some rather monstrously strong characters. In fact, almost too much strong. So we saw characters at like the 2700 CP range that were in this league, which tended to create very long battles because their defense and their health pools were so incredibly high that killing the things just took forever. Now, could you do it? Sure, absolutely you could. And a lot of people did. I just felt like the rewards at the end were not going to be worth all the effort this time around, and chose to kind of only semi-participate. I put half effort into it to collect loot, but I didn't really want to compete because it just felt frustrating, like banging my head against a wall. And I do believe that other people felt that way too. So much so that SG decided to run a survey before the final week of this league. And they're like, hey, so we noticed these guys are really strong and people are not really happy with how long the battles are taking. Do you think we should like semi-nerf some of the characters down? Maybe like not increase their defense level quite as high or whatever it was. I think that's what they decided, is they weren't going to give the bonuses to defense, but they'll put the other things still in there. So it allowed fights to continue to move faster. And everyone did agree that, well, not everyone, but the majority of people did agree that would be ideal for the final week. What does that mean? That means that the idea of buffing these characters up this much just was a terrible idea. Like, it just, and was not well received by the entire community. Like, it was just a nightmare to have to deal with these fights that lasted forever all the time. And they want you to do up to 8 of them in a single day at the end week. Like, it's just so time consuming. No one has the time to commit to all of that. So I do think it was wise of them to reduce that down. It's so much effort. So in the future, my thought process is this. I like the idea of boosting these older characters, but seeing as though you never know when you're going to release these new costumes and it's going to conflict with your schedule, I think it would be as simple as creating a hard cap to the max CP a character can be to participate in the league. So you could give them a % bonus, but perhaps say that at 2000 CP, everyone's capped, right? And look, brand new heroes that are coming out right now are still at 1625. So if you have a character at 2000 CP, you're still well above the curve right now. And I think that's fine. Stop it there. Stop it at 2000 CP. And that way, no one gets so far above the curve that you're having unrealistic battles that just take forever. Now, I do understand that this hard cap will be relative. What do I mean by that? Well, as time goes on, characters are going to progress in strength, right? We're going to catch up to 2000 CP, so you can't leave it hard capped at 2000 CP forever. This is simply a suggestive tool to help stop the ceiling from getting so high, and it would have to be a movable tool. At some point, they'll have to change that cap to like maybe 2100, then 2200. But like, do it within stride with the natural CP growth. Like, just find a way to make sure that we aren't getting characters. Like, if new characters are coming out at 1625 right now, but you're fighting characters at 2700 plus CP, like, that's not realistic. That's either you have the characters and you win because you have these boosted characters, or you're fighting an uphill battle like David versus Goliath, and you get the wins in that you can, but realistically, you're just set up for mostly failure. And I just don't think that's the way that they want to continue with the league moving forward. But we'll see what they choose to do. Just throwing out my suggestion. All right, that's enough of that since we did cover this last month as well. Let's move on to our next topic. Yes, the Harvest Summon. Okay, so I will admit that this is one of my favorite gimmick summons of the year. We had a fun time with Harvest Summon at the beginning of September, and they have a very interesting mechanic here where you get the extra draws, the extra pulls. You all went through it. You remember what it was like. It was an exciting thrill. They also very much emphasize that there are only recent heroes in this portal. Now, I mean, let's have a little chat about what they consider a recent hero, because they go 2 years back. And by no means does my definition of the word recent include something that was 2 years ago. But that's a matter of interpretation, and they are certainly trying to sell. So, like, that's fine. I do appreciate that they did a cutoff of 2 years, because getting something older than 2 years is literally pointless. Now, I will say, although I really enjoy this mechanic, and I do think a lot of people probably got some nice pulls from this. I watched videos online of people pulling, and I did see a lot of people pull some cool stuff. The featured heroes being at a 0.2% is very, very, very low. I say this because in my alliance, not a single person pulled one of the Valiant Vegetables. And I'm not saying that we have to, but I mean, kind of the whole point of featuring these new heroes into the game is so that some people can get them and use them and so on and so forth. And yes, I do see Valiant Vegetables that I go up against, but in reality, I understand that someone probably either got extremely lucky or they were pulling an ungodly amount. And I mean that because a lot of the times when I see the Valiant Vegetables, there are at least 2, sometimes even 3 in a team. And at that pull rate, I don't know. You basically would have to be taking out a second mortgage on your house to get 3 Valiant Vegetables. But anyway, the point is that the rest of the summon was fun. I did find it entertaining. It was not very kind to me. In all the pulls that I did, it only gave me one really efficient 5-star. It's still kind of older, but I pulled a Fox. And I do like the Foxes. Their passive that reduces healing is valuable overall. I sometimes feel disappointed, like I did at the end of this, but I do love the gimmick portals, and the next one that comes around will also have my attention. I already know this. I accept it. I like it. I just wish that, I would get a little luckier sometimes with them. But that's how it works. It's gambling regardless. But I do think it's cool, and I hope that they have more mechanics like the Harvest Summon one that gives you a random amount of pulls. Either way, you got a bonus pull each time, so it was like a 2-for-1 deal, and I really appreciate getting the extra pulls without the extra spending, if that makes sense. So kudos to them. I hope they continue to come up with neat mechanics like that to keep me engaged and entertained, and I will continue to participate. Again, share your thoughts on if you like this sort of mechanic, if you think these portals are trash. I'd love to talk about that too, but it's definitely a very interesting way to go, and I think next up will be Black Friday Summon for that. I hope that they do something a little more with Black Friday Summon this year to make it more intriguing. I think it's starting to fall behind in some of the gimmicky draw compared to some of the other ones, but we will see how that goes. All right, let's see what else we got on deck for today. Okay, and let's get into our quality of life changes for this past month. I was running a little bit short on time. Things have been crazy the last couple of days. Normally I do a nice little outline. You can see what we're going to talk about. But in reality, this particular month, the quality of life changes have been fairly minimal. I think they've been busy working on the big Halloween events that will be coming. And we'll talk more about that later in the video. But just understand that there's going to be minimal stuff for this. A couple of things worth noting, however, and these will mostly be things that I want us to be aware of and continue to think of moving forward. We did have some issues still with loot that I think requires some adjusting. This includes the loot that comes from the League events. Basically, it's a month-long event, and I feel like although they did do a better job increasing some of the loot that we get from that, we're still not necessarily seeing what I consider to be a months-long investment. There are several ways of handling this, including having them consider making this reward system similar, but just have it pay out each week based off of your scoring of the week. And then honestly, it doesn't even matter if there's an end of the month reward, because in reality, you'd be paid out each week. So it's just bonus if you continue to stay in. I think that would make a little bit more sense than waiting for the whole month and then rewarding you once. But that's fine. Again, that's something they will work on. Next thing up is the Titan loot. I think the Titan loot does require some readjustment as well. I do understand that they decided to offer us another guaranteed bounty slot, which was cool, but then they also introduced other things that you were going to get, and it was like food and iron crates and things like that. And whereas that is kind of fun, in fact, I think food and iron crates to me are probably more effective or useful than getting like a battle item. It's still ended up diluting the pool, if you will. So in other words, yes, you got another loot slot, but with more loot to get instead of quality high-end loot, you actually have more loot slots, but seem to be getting the premium items even less. And I don't think that that's great, because in reality, what that did was create a buff and a nerf at the same time. And it's still not quite where I would like it to be. I think it still would not be a bad idea for them to consider a successful Titan kill to guarantee give a Master Emblem and possibly up to 10 Master Emblems. Like, I would like one of the loot slots to specifically be Master Emblem and have it be a random chance from 1 to 10. 10 obviously being extremely rare, but, you know, in between, you can put various rarity scales into play. I do think that's just a better idea overall for how we can increase Titan effectiveness for us all to continue to move forward. All right, so then we've covered our loot-related issues. We also had the Dragon first year anniversary this month. That was kind of fun. They did give some fairly interesting things, including the introduction of the Dragon Cave, which was another quest that involved dragons assisting your heroes, and you got some cool loot for that too. I don't know. Honestly, did the dragons ever need to be put into this game? I really don't feel like that was a yes, but it's also not terrible that they're there. It is something else to do, and honestly, even if you don't overinvest in dragons, you can still play this game pretty well. Now, you're going to want some kind of dragon activity going on for like your Skyfire Wars, etc. So I do recommend that you don't ignore it entirely, but you can put extremely minimal effort into the dragon side of this game and still get what you need out of it to succeed for the rest of it. And sometimes it's just kind of fun. I mean, who doesn't like dragons, right? So, I mean, that is kind of fun. I've collected a few 5 stars. I haven't even been able to max one. It's been a full year. I just don't participate enough to get all the items necessary to have maxed a 5-star dragon, but I have a few that are, you know, at the tier before waiting to ascend. So I'm sure a lot of people are in similar boats. Interesting stuff. Let's see. I think for quality of life things to discuss in this particular one, maybe we keep this one short. Like, I do think there's definitely more to go into, but this was a fairly minor month for, like I said, changes and effects like that. And I do think this was all just gearing up for and preparing for next month's brand new Halloween events and seeing what comes from that. So, yeah, we'll just kind of cut it off here for this month. I will continue to discuss things that I think need a little bit more focus, and I will definitely mention the positive things that they offer us as well. That's the whole point of this section, is to not just criticize, but to offer gratitude for the things that they do for us. So we will go ahead and pick this up next month, and we will go from there. Let's move on to our next topic. Okay, so this is a bit of a tough one, and something I did not necessarily see coming, if I'm being entirely honest. But we did get the news that the forums are actually going to be shutting down. The community forums that have been pretty much around since the existence of this game, that has collected a treasure trove of useful information for players, reference guides, all sorts of things to help make your Empires and Puzzles experience a little bit better. These forums, unfortunately, are going to be shutting down. And I understand that this is not entirely on the SG team. There is new rules and regulations that have been passed in the EU, and if you're unfamiliar, the headquarters of Empires and Puzzles is located in Europe. So, like, with that in mind, they are subject to these new rules, which are going to require them to identity check more or less everybody who signs up on these forums, and their forums were not set up to do that. In order to do that, the costs just seemed unrealistic to them, so they decided that rather than keep the forums going, they needed to evolve and morph into a new system. So what will that new system be? Well, instead of our standard community forums, which we have grown to love, we're going to be moving over to a new Empires and Puzzles Discord server. So this is not that crazy. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Discord already. It's a pretty popular app that you can download for Android or Apple phone, and it will allow you to do a lot of the things that you could do on the forums. In fact, it will even increase the functionality of certain parts of things. What is a little bit different, though, is that I don't think that you're going to be able to archive and keep all the information that you have from years and years of gathering this stuff that was accessible to you on the forums. I also don't think there's going to be a way for you to search individual characters and see them like you did on the forums and have a discussion post on individual characters. But I could be wrong. Maybe they will find a way to make individual characters searchable and information on them? I don't know. I am not going to overly judge them until I see the product that they put out on Discord. And at that point, I think we can make a more informed decision on whether or not this ended up being a good thing for Empires and Puzzles, if this was just a really sad moment in which we are losing a resource that was like invaluable to us as players. But I am trying to stay optimistic and positive. They are talking about running like contests where you can win stuff, and who knows, maybe it will be just the next evolution in this process. I mean, look, at this point, I'm getting a little bit older. I enjoy the bulletin board style because I grew up with that, right? But the truth is, times are changing. That is kind of an older format. There are newer systems out there. So again, I'm going to hold judgment until I see what it is that they actually put into play. But also as a content creator, I will point out that I enjoyed the forums because I was able to post my videos directly under each character's page, and they were able to view them and see them. And I thought that was a good way for me to generate additional traffic as well. Now, I will most likely be posting on Discord as well. Will it be as efficient? I don't know. But I, again, can be hopeful that all of this turns out to be a positive for us and not end up focusing on the negative. But the important part is that if you like the forums, if there's information that you found useful on the forums, you are going to want to go to the forums right now, click on those links, and maybe put a favorite on your web browser, because your pathway or your connection to them through the forums will disappear. So if the only way you had to get to your useful spreadsheets or reference guides were to go to the forums and click on a link on the forums, yeah, you need a new plan. You need to make sure that you favorite that in your browser. You need to create your own links from some other place. Say, maybe your alliance has a place that they can post links in their Discord or in their line or whatever it is. But the point is, you're going to want to make sure that whatever useful information you were getting from the forums, you find a new way to connect to it other than a link on the forums. All right, I think that's enough with this particular topic. It is kind of a sad one. I don't want to spend too much time harping on it, so we will go ahead and move on to our next topic as well. All right, so what's on deck this month? What's been changing in the meta? What should we be prepared for? And how can we be ready for the month to come? Well, let's take a quick talk about it. So basically, the last couple months, the meta has really been controlled with mana, like lots of mana reduction, lots of like reduced mana gained or increased mana gain, etc. That has pretty much been the king of the meta at recent. And this is a pretty regular thing. In fact, I would say this is the most normal of metas, is mana manipulation. And then we have time periods in which something really powerful comes along and sort of takes over from that, but then we revert back. So that has been the case for the last couple of months and continues to be. So with that in mind, you're still going to see really strong characters in like using your toons or your astral dwarves or your fawns or just characters in general. Beowulf family, all of them resist the mana reductions, and it gives you a better chance to keep your team flowing as opposed to being picked apart by mana reduction. In fact, I did a war recently where most teams had at least 2 characters that did mana reduction, and it was insane to try to get anything done. My alliance ended up losing that war by a lot just because we couldn't really get good hits in. With a combination of bad boards with tiles and a lot of mana reduction, you can really slow down your opponent. So just keep that in mind. But there has also been a new trend in the meta that I do want to go into and talk about so that you're all prepared for it, and that has been the Valiant Vegetables. Now, these Valiant Vegetables, I do understand we're talking more about the higher echelon of rating at this point. Most people in the lower tiers maybe got lucky and pulled a Valiant Vegetable. However, at my rating tiers, I'm finding some people that have 2 or even more than 2 Valiant Vegetables in their defensive teams for rating and for war, which is absolutely bonkers to deal with, right? Because it just pumps out at least 2 fiends per turn, and that can get extremely overwhelming very quickly. In order to combat that, I just want to offer some suggestions. First of all, one, you want to have healing. I would recommend no less than 2 healers. But ideally, when you're going up against a team like this where healing is pretty much everything, you maybe want 2 dedicated healers and a DPSer that does some additional healing as well to help you push through the amount of healing necessary to clear these fiends. But also worth noting, another way to combat them will be minion creators. So the minion creators are going to go ahead and create a minion that overwrites the fiends, right? So instead of having to sort of deal with the fiend being down and healed off, you can replace it with minions, and that will definitely help you keep this under control as well. It's a very cool system. I've been doing that a lot, a combination of like 2 healers and a minion maker as separate ways of handling the fiends that are up, and it helps me keep it under control, and then I usually end up whittling things down with dots. So like I'll bring dot characters that just kind of burst through it. The only thing you got to do is make sure you remove their healer on their end, and then just slow roll your way to victory, making sure you keep the fiends cleared. It's irritating, but it can work. This is the type of thing that you kind of got to do when you're being overwhelmed with this many fiends. Now, there are other options too. Like, there are characters that will turn... that will get rid of all fiends and so on and so forth, but they're kind of far and few between. And so, I mean, with that in mind, I think you're probably better off planning on just clearing them, rather than worrying about like trying to necessarily get rid of them or stop them. But there are some characters still that have the fiend resist Aether power as well. They're a wonderful choice to bring to this type of fight as well. If you can stop your guys from getting fiends for the first 6 turns, it's really going to slow down the progression of how quickly they try to overtake you. So if you have 2 or 3 characters with fiend resist, it's going to make them a lot less viable and much easier to clear and keep your team clear and ready to go. So that's just a couple thoughts on the Valiant Vegetable nonsense that we're dealing with right now in the meta. And yeah, so be prepared. Like I said, mana reduction, have your characters on deck that resist it. And then for these crazy vegetables, remember 2 healers or minion makers to help reduce the amount of fiends you have to deal with. Okay, that's everything. We will move into our calendar review next. All right, so let's go ahead and get ready to take a look at the October calendar so you can tell what's up and coming and be prepared for the month to come. And there should be some very interesting stuff added to this October calendar, including some never-before-seen events that should make for an interesting Halloween period. So we'll get into all that as we go, but let's see if we can take a closer look at what's going on at the beginning of the month. So to start things out, we'll still be in Ancient Underroot for the Dragons. Then on Thursday, it looks like we have Untold Tales 2 coming out, Treasures of Flame and Frost. So, like, I fully expect that we're still going to get more characters. I know there has been news of the beta receiving costumes for Untold, but it is way too soon to expect them to be out. So just expect the normal characters from the Frost family to get a new edition, I'm guessing, and we'll kind of go from there. Now, moving into next week, it looks like come Monday, we are going to see a Challenge Festival, and this is going to be Challenge Festival 2. This is exciting. I know some people are looking forward to what kind of costumes they'll be putting out next. I know somebody who's very excited for pet costumes, hoping that they will come around this time around. I do expect there to be pet costumes at some point, but we got to wait our turn, I suppose, and hopefully that will be soon. All right, then coming up on Wednesday the 8th is going to be the Sanguine Fest, new Halloween event. So now we're at the point where we need to start talking about what this new Halloween event is all about. So they plan on running 2 Halloween events this particular year. They're going to have your standard Halloween event that we were all very used to, right? So that's going to be fun. There's going to be some new characters. There's going to be old characters. You're going to be able to pull all of that with your Epic Hero tokens, etc. However, at the same time, they will be running a concurrent new event called the Sanguine Portal, or Sanguine, whatever they're going to call it. Anyway, this is going to be a vampire-themed portal in which they will be introducing 2 new families. I believe they are warring families, and you can collect 3, 4, and 5 stars for each. They seem very interesting. They're going to be very strong, but also worth noting, they have a little caveat with this summon portal where if you pull one of these characters, they're supposedly going to be given to you at full ascension. So what does that mean? We're not talking about limit breaks, but in other words, if you pull a 5-star, you should be receiving them at 480 already. So you'll already be ready to put regular talents on them, and then you can choose to limit break them if you are so inclined. But regardless, you are collecting them at the 480, which is pretty awesome. I fully expect this to be a pretty expensive portal, mind you, but they are adding a caveat where you will be able to receive Sanguine souls from clearing this event. There will be like special monsters, kind of like you see in the seasons with like the treasure goblins or the bats or whatever. They're going to appear throughout the event, and you can redo the levels to try to find more of these. Each one that you kill will give you a certain amount of Sanguine soul, and when you collect enough of that, you'll be able to do a free summon. Now, each one of your pulls in the regular Halloween event, to my knowledge, is still supposed to also give you some Sanguine souls towards the new pulls as well. So hold on to your Epic Hero tokens, and we will see how all of this plays out. Super exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to having something new there. Then, also on what looks like Thursday the 9th, they are giving us the Costume Chamber once more. I fully expect us to get some new glass costumes. I don't think we've quite gotten through the whole rotation yet, but we're getting awfully darn close. So I expect there'll probably be a new type of costume on the horizon for Season 1s before too long. So just keep that in mind. Then we also have, starting Saturday, which event is this? Conquest of Elements. Okay, so starting on Saturday, we're going to get Conquest of Elements. I'm guessing since the bar is red, it will be for red, but we shall see. It doesn't necessarily list the color there. And then on Monday, it looks like we will be starting the Alliance Quest, Night of the Moths. So still dealing with moths every month. I don't hate that. I think the moths are a fantastic family. So you can't really complain about that. They are all over the meta, and for good reason. Their moth dust is a really powerful effect. Then down here on the 15th, interestingly enough, they're running another Untold Tales 2. So a second one for the month. That's a little bit interesting. Maybe they are trying to speed things along to get to the costumes faster. I'm not sure. But regardless, that will be the second one for the month there. Then moving on Saturday, gosh, this week is going to be so packed with events. Saturday, that looks like the Goblin Portal. Now, I do fully expect the Goblins to be getting a more interesting Goblin this time around. I think the first one they put out was a little on the bland side, so here's hoping that we get a spicy new character for the Goblins. And then Sunday brings us the Mage Tower as well. So you are just going to be jam-packed full of portals to consider pulling from. So what a wonderful weekend for them to maybe do a gem challenge pull or something like that. You'd have so many portals to choose from. Don't know if they'll do it, but that'd be pretty cool. Then down here, we have the Magic Tower going all the way through until Friday the 24th. Oh, wait, nope, Thursday the 23rd, sorry. Thursday the 23rd, we will see the Astral Plane portal. So that's going to give us most likely the Astral Demons. I do believe a new family will be introduced this particular month to kind of go with the themes of Halloween. They're going to have the Astral Demons released. They will have a new ability called Resonance, which is going to be somewhat similar to Adopt, but not quite the same. You'll have to see how that goes. It's very interesting. And then we'll have, let's see, Shadows of the Deep coming in on Friday the 24th. And we can fully expect there to be a new either Investigator or Forsaken family hero added there. Then following down to the final week, on Monday the 27th, we get another Contest of Elements. This bar being yellow makes me think that it will be a yellow one. I mean, just using some problem solving there. And then we also get, let's see, an Ancient Underroot, a War of Three Kingdoms. There it is. I was fully expecting there to be a War of Three Kingdoms at the end of the month. They seem to be rolling over at the start of every month right now with War of Three Kingdoms. So that's a theme, and I'm fine with it. It's really easy to predict when it's going to be. And then last but not least, on the 29th, this is always important to remember, there will be a visiting outfitter. So it's a good time to consider what options you have available to you. More of the tunes should open up. So if you have any other characters for Season 1 that you don't have a tune costume for, great opportunity to get your hands on some of them. We are going to get some more costumes in general opening up, as it did require a year and a half, but quite a few costumes were introduced in the time periods where we are now getting to a year and a half. So it should be more interesting than the last couple costume portals, or at least that is my hope. So, sorry, not costume portals, but visiting outfitter. I think we all knew what I meant there. So just a couple things to consider. And, you know, I do appreciate everyone taking the time to tune into this. I hope you find this useful and fun to kind of listen to as you're maybe doing your work day or stuck on a commute or whatever the case may be. I do kind of put this out as a longer format just because I think it's fun to have that option to sort of fill some time if you're looking to do that kind of thing. But of course, my majority of my content is the character review videos, which are much shorter, and I have started doing some quick poll videos and various other things like that, just because people do seem interested in seeing what I pull, and I'm happy to share that with everybody. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next month.